Happy Thursday, everybody. My name is Daren Garcia. I'm the co-founder and managing director here at BWG Connect. We're a networking and knowledge sharing group of thousands of brands who do exactly that. We network and knowledge share together to stay on top of the newest trends, strategies, pain points, whatever it is that's shaping digital today. I talk with 30 to 40 brands a week to stay on top of those trends. We don't sell anything here. We're just a great big networking group. We leverage each other's knowledge to tackle those pain points, but also find the right service providers as well as we help people vet on a regular basis. We're going to do close to 600 events this year, a good chunk of those virtual, but also close to 100 in-person small format dinners across the US. So if you're around any major shows or if you're in a tier 1, tier 2 city, just let us know. It'd be great to meet you in person around a 15 to 25 person dinner. Couple housekeeping items as we get started. The first one is we're starting here at 3 to 4 minutes after the hour, and we're going to wrap up with 3 to 4 minutes to go in the hour as well. We're going to give you plenty of time to get on to your next meeting without being late. The other thing is we want this to be as educational and informational as possible. So at any point in time, if you have any questions, you can drop them into the chat. You can drop them into the Q&A section there. You can always email them to me, Aaron, Aaron at bwgconnect.com. Or you can just, raise your hand and we can bring you into the conversation as well. We're going to try and get people involved across the board. I know a lot of people have questions just from the conversations I'm having. So I want to kind of kick off the reason for this and what's been coming up routinely, international expansion and brand control. So COVID hits, we're almost a couple of years into it now. Tons of people jump on to Amazon and other marketplaces. It's a great way to increase sales. Over the past 2 years, though, what were once smaller brands on marketplaces on Amazon is now blown up into larger brands, and now where they have a lot of trouble with unauthorized resellers, brand control as a whole. And you throw on top of that a major trend is people going international. And so we just had a ton of questions on these two that coincide and overlap quite a bit. And we have some great friends, partners, and supporters of the network for, I think, basically 4 years now since we kicked this off at Vorys eControl. And so Daren and the team is here to answer, kind of give us some guidance and as well as answer as many questions as we can throw at them over the next 50 minutes or so. So Daren, I'll kick it over to you if you want to do a brief intro on yourself and Vorys, and we can kick it around the horn here so everybody can do an intro, and we'll jump into the content. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having us. So I'm Daren Garcia. I'm a partner at Vorys eControl and joined here by colleagues Jessica Cunning and Sarah Long, who is one of the leaders of the eControl Global Coalition in Europe, and I'll let them formally introduce themselves in a second. But Vorys eControl is a team within a law firm that really works with more brands than anybody in the world, of which we're aware, at helping them to control their online sales and leveraging that control to drive healthy revenue online and ultimately offline as well. So we work with about 600 branded manufacturers in this area, both domestically in the US and internationally. Sarah and I are in London. Now we do Sarah's based here. I'm here visiting, but we do a ton of work helping brands implement control strategies in Europe in addition to the US. So that's what we'll be focused on today. Really, how do your European control programs or how are they similar and different to what the path forward is in Europe? So I'll let my colleagues say hi quickly on our side.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Cunning and I'm a partner at Vorys eControl with Daren. And like Daren mentioned, very excited to be talking with all of you today about the similarities and differences between a US and Europe eControl program. So Sarah, did you want to do a brief intro on Euclid Law?
Yes, thank you very much, Jessica and Daren. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Long. I'm a partner at Euclid Law. I've been working with Daren for quite a few years now on the eControl team. So what we do is we provide the expertise, the competition law expertise that required in Europe in order to set up a system which enables you to control your sales online in a legally compliant way. So we are probably the firm doing the most work in this area, I would say, in Europe at the moment. We are a boutique competition law firm, so we do competition law, and that's all we do. And that enables us to be highly specialised in the field. And my colleague, Beckett McGrath, who's also kind of a co-leader of the eControl Europe team, is one of the foremost thinkers in this area as well. So we have a lot of experience. We have worked with brands, but we've also worked with platforms and retailers over the years. So we have a really good understanding of the entire ecosystem, which is fundamental in order to understand how the competition law intersects with this.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And Daren, can you just briefly touch on for the listeners today about how Vorys eControl and Euclid work together as part of our eControl Global Coalition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Vorys eControl, I mean, many of you on the phone may work with us. We specialize in helping brands to assert control over online marketplace ecosystems, Amazon, Walmart, eBay, and other marketplaces around the world. And, we manage that from a legal perspective in the US, as well as a monitoring tech and global management process around the world. And as we go into different jurisdictions, certainly like Europe, like Canada, like Mexico, like Australia, China, et cetera, we partner with local experts who understand brand strategic objectives in the relevant markets and can help to implement the strategies necessary to maintain control. And just to be very clear, when we say control, really, how do you ensure that your online go-to-market strategy can be executed? So many brands say, oh, I have a one-piece strategy with Amazon, or I have a three-piece strategy with Amazon, or we sell on Amazon ourselves, and you look, and whether it's Amazon 1P, their 3P storefront, whatever, you're winning, 40% of buy box. Amazon 1P is winning 80% of buy box. You're leaving significant revenue on the table, and your brand, from an equity and value standpoint, is being massively eroded. Poor consumer experience, all sorts of things happening. And so, how do you, as a brand, execute the strategy that you want and drive the vast majority of sales through your authorized sellers in a manner consistent with your brand equity and control your own destiny on these platforms? And so that's really, when we talk about eControl, typically the use case that brands are leveraging us for. And so in Europe, we looked long and hard for the right team and found them in Euclid, which is a member of the eControl Global Coalition here. And that's how we all work together. It's, from a brand perspective, it's essentially a one-stop shop.
Great. So that segues nicely then into just kind of taking a temperature from the attendees today about the disruption that they're experiencing and the control or lack thereof that they have on those online marketplaces. So Aaron, can you pass the poll here? Question number 1, just wanted to get a sense about which of these images more accurately depicts how your products appear on American online marketplaces. So Amazon US, Walmart Marketplace, eBay, which one better describes you, A or B?
Yeah, so if you get a chance, we just launched it. We'll probably give it another 30 seconds or so, but if you get that chance, go ahead and drop an answer in there. Most kind of have it split right now, 75-25. It's going to be interesting. We'll give it, 15 more seconds here if people want to jump in. And just a reminder, anybody you have questions, just, raise your hand there or drop into the chat or the Q&A and we'll get them answered. We're going to give it 5 more seconds here if anybody wants to vote. All right, I'm going to end the poll now and then I will share it. So it's 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so same question, but now Europe.
I wondered now, so stop sharing. Let's see if I can relaunch the poll. Here we go. Oh, so everybody, I just relaunched it. So let's take it now, European online marketplaces.
Those 50% to pick B for the US are good Vorys clients.
Yeah, so it's 50-50 in the US, and then this one is European. Yeah, interesting. So I'm going to end the poll here. In about 5 seconds. 4, So different story on this side here, and I'll share these results as well right now. So it switches from 50-50, right, to basically 1/3 to 2/3. Is this fairly common? Is that what you guys see? You guys are just helping a ton of brands out here. Is this fairly common?
I mean, I think what you're seeing is really consistent with what Jessica's showing here. I mean, in the US, brands have had a bit more time to get their house in order to implement the programs necessary, and they are experiencing the same phenomena here in Europe as they did in the States several years ago, and working to try to get that under control.
Yeah, so it's actually really consistent with a lot of the feedback that we've received from clients about, getting their eControl strategy up in the US and running, and then having the bandwidth to actually look across Europe, look at the disruption that's taking place there, and start thinking about what they can do there and what pieces and parts might be applicable from their US strategy.
So a quick question that comes in is around, does the US strategy have to be in place before going international? Is it recommended, or is it a requirement?
It's not necessary or required. We work with a lot of European native brands that start in Europe because that's where I think, it's not unnatural for US brands to get their US house in order and then migrate over. But fundamentally, you can really start anywhere in the world. And frankly, even Europe is a market that is probably the most strict in the world. And so when you get it right in Europe, you can essentially get it right anywhere else. So some brands start in Europe and then sort of bootstrap that to every other market, because if you're compliant here, you're basically compliant everywhere.
Awesome. Love it. And everybody keep dropping questions into the chat, the question, or emailing them to me.
So Daren, I think we have a lot of people attending today that are on the e-commerce team. So can you touch upon, and Sarah as well, what you've observed with e-com teams in the US and in Europe, with their experiencing the disruption on online marketplaces? What are they seeing, and what are they trying to do to combat it besides eControl programs?
Yeah, so I think, and then Sarah, please, chime in with anything that I miss. I think that the market and e-commerce leaders will understand this better than anybody in their organizations, that on any given day on marketplace platforms, you can have any number of factors that can disrupt your sales and your brand. It could be unauthorized sellers, so people selling genuine product in an unauthorized manner that disrupts your marketplace strategy. It could certainly be counterfeit products, diversion and parallel imports, meaning stuff leaking out of your authorized channels in country, or stuff coming from overseas, like for example from the US into Europe or vice versa. Authorized seller policy violations or selective distribution violations, meaning retailers that you've authorized in other channels turning around and selling on marketplaces. In the US, where you can do things like MAP policies, you'll have MAP violators that can screw up your sales and your pricing. You have brick and mortar challenges, and everybody's scraping everybody else. And so on any given day, any of these issues can creep up and cause you problems. And I think what a lot of e-commerce teams struggle with is they take very fragmented approaches. They may have some software that can look for counterfeits, or they may be doing brand registry takedowns, or they may be, trying to get their law firm to do something about it. And the challenge becomes that really no provider is able to offer the integrated solutions necessary to flex to any one of these issues at any given time, nor can they tailor nor are teams really appropriately tailoring their activity to driving revenue. Okay. And you need to get away from sort of a whack-a-mole type approach. Oh my gosh, there's a counterfeit over here. I have a MAP violation over here in the US. There's some unauthorized seller, over here, whatever it is. They're sort of playing a whack-a-mole strategy rather than saying, what is actually disrupting my sales, and targeting that. And so this is really the landscape and what we're seeing on any given day.
And we joke, Daren, that this is our iceberg slide, but we've done a really good job, I think, of educating manufacturers in the US that a lot of the product ultimately starts with them and flows from them. And the product that's making its way oftentimes onto online marketplaces is because the brand has lost control of its downstream distribution. So Sarah, curious about your thoughts on whether this kind of reckoning is recognized yet in Europe, or is this still
Well, I think as a sort of general statement, and I can say this now, having done this for a couple of years, I mean, in all honesty, the majority of the brands we speak to when looking at Europe are really only seeing kind of the tip of the iceberg. And that's slightly the problem that we have, which is that e-com teams will be tasked with fixing Amazon and fixing the problem as if it can be done by one person through kind of one decision or by a piece of software. And what we see is that really, and there needs to be a holistic solution, which we'll be kind of talking through. But what is very clear in Europe is that you scratch the surface and suddenly you realize that the company hasn't really been thinking about this at all, because they've not really focused on their online sales. And this is particularly, I would say, a problem because of the way Europe works. We have, a lot of brands who choose to have distributors in different European countries, and they don't have a view as to what everyone is doing necessarily, or where any of these sales are coming from. So it is much harder to play the whack-a-mole game because it could be from anywhere across Europe. So the starting point over here is really trying to understand, where are they trying to get to, but then also trying to ensure they understand that it's got to be a holistic approach.
So if a brand's interested in quantifying the disruption that they're experiencing on Amazon France, Amazon Germany, Daren, what are some of the metrics that the e-commerce team should be looking for, and why do they matter?
Yeah, so I think that we talk to a lot of companies and say, well, why are you giving me this disruption report, or why are we talking about Amazon? It's my best channel, and it's my channel that's growing the fastest. And we say, well, obviously it is. I mean, it's the fastest growing, channel in the world. I mean, it's an all boats rise environment. What you need to understand relative to Amazon is how effective is your actual performance relative to your stated strategy. Meaning, if you're selling 1P to Amazon, what is the percentage of buy box that Amazon owns across your portfolio? If you're selling 3P, what's the percentage of buy box that you or your chosen 3P seller own across your portfolio? And you're going to find that in many instances, it's a fraction of the available size of prize. And certainly when that happens, all of a sudden your marketing campaigns aren't optimized, inventory management becomes very hard. Essentially your traffic times conversion times your sales price equation begins to be disrupted. And so I think brands, from a disruption standpoint in Europe, where you're not tracking things like pricing and those sorts of things, given the way the legal regimes work, you need to fundamentally understand how much control do I have over my buy box. And so essentially this slide is showing, we have the ability to run these data reports on an ASIN level to be able to show brands, what is the level of revenue or buy box being captured by your authorized seller relative to other sellers on an ASIN basis. And this will give you a clear sense as to the true success of your strategy relative to what the overall size of prize is in the channel.
So with that, I'm sure a lot of the people on the webinar today are really wondering, what does the eControl program in Europe look like? How does that compare to the US program? So I want to stress here today that you can get to the same state from a control perspective, but the path is just a little different in terms of how we approach that. So I wanted to take some time now to dive into how they're similar and how they're different, with Daren leading on the US side and then Sarah drilling down more on the Europe side. So Sarah, can you help us understand at a high level, what you need to be putting in place when you're looking to execute on your Europe eControl program strategy? And then we'll dive a little bit more into the weeds.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jessica. So you'll see on the slide there, we've got a reference to selective distribution system, which sounds a little bit technical. So the way I always describe this is like a private members club. So what you're looking to do in Europe is control the sales of your products by setting up a group of invested distributors, wholesalers, retailers, sellers effectively, who are allowed to sell your product. You have permitted to sell your product. In order to sell your product, they need to meet certain criteria. And so this is why it's a bit like a private members club with a pretty strict sort of dress code. So if you're not wearing your sort of suit and shirt and tie and nice shoes, you're not going to get in. And the reason that this is important is it enables brands to effectively kind of curate who is selling their product and bring them into the club. Once those resellers are in the club, then they need to be able to sell across to each other. So you do have a resale requirement within that club. But importantly, they are not allowed to sell to anyone outside of the club. So you ring fence who is selling your products to a limited, if that's what you want to do. You can have as many or as few as you want to a certain extent. So you ring fence who sells your products to a limited number of invested distributors, retailers, and wholesalers. And that's important because actually many brands don't really understand. Sometimes we meet brands who don't realize that they can put this sort of control in place at all. So there's a sense that actually you've just got to let free distribution happen in Europe. But you are, as a brand, allowed within the sort of legal framework to impose quite a lot of rules and restrictions effectively on how your product is sold. And that is what you need to do in order to make sure that the right people are selling your product. And what that means is that those people outside of the selective distribution system or sort of private club are not allowed to sell your products. And then if they are found to be selling your products, you would then take some form of appropriate action against them, which we can sort of talk about in a bit more detail. So it is a mechanism which is slightly different to the way in which the process works in the US, but ultimately does enable brands to have a lot more control over the entities that are selling their product.
Just really quick, a question comes in. Under selective distribution, are you able to limit the countries they can sell in? So I'll give you a perfect example. Before this, I'm at Perigo launching, the Amazon business in the EU, and we've got distributors in every country over there, and it's all cross-border sales into, different platforms. Are you able to restrict?
So this is a really great question, actually, because it ties into the move from a traditional exclusive distribution concept, which is where you would normally have, traditionally you would have a brand that sells to, say, a wholesaler that is appointed for France, a wholesaler that's appointed for Germany, a wholesaler that's appointed for Spain. They would then sell downstream to their retailers, but that wholesaler would be appointed that territory. That sort of territorial exclusivity falls away with selective distribution because you then must be allowed to sell across the European network effectively. The point I would make here, and it's a little bit techie, but bear with me because it is important. Although you have territorial protection under an exclusive model, i.e. you are the sole appointed distributor for that territory, under European competition law, you cannot prohibit passive sales. Passive sales is me getting online and saying, I want to buy a product from France because actually it's cheaper and I'm going to have it delivered to my address. An active sale would be that company in France direct marketing to me through, say, emails, things like that. Under EU competition law, you can't prohibit passive sales. So the point is that the EU consumer, the consumer sitting in any country in Europe, can buy from anywhere else in Europe. So that's why the exclusive distribution model isn't really fit for service anymore, because in an online world, people are procuring their goods from all around Europe because they know how to shop around. The exclusive model was set up for a brick and mortar world where you went down the road and you bought from your local brick and mortar store and that was it. So it doesn't, although sometimes brands get a bit nervous about moving away from this very traditional sort of setting and losing this territorial protection, in practice, in a world where everyone and consumers are buying online, that territorial protection is more apparent than real.
Awesome. Love it.
So contrasting this then to the US side, Daren, can you just touch on, from a controlling distribution aspect, how the authorized seller program in some ways mirrors the selective distribution in Europe, but a key element that's different is obviously the gray market or unauthorized seller legal foundation. So can you just touch on how those two pieces are a little different than the eControl solution for Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that brands operating globally can take comfort in the fact that the controls relative to your authorized sellers, so distributors, brick and mortar retailers, and things like that, are fairly similar in both markets. There are certain core concepts. You need to cover each of your channels with an appropriate policy. You need to have appropriate rules and things that those customers need to meet to be an authorized customer. Those need to be passed down through your channels. You can't have totally uncovered channels that aren't governed by any of your policies or your terms. From a technical standpoint, they become a bit different insofar as in the States, you're not stating specific criteria. I mean, Sarah analogized to the rules of the private members club, but and things like that. And you don't have to be as precise perhaps in the US as you do in Europe, but the fundamental framework is the same. So if you're sitting there and you're a brand in the US that's looking to do something similar in Europe, and you've gotten comfortable with the notion of an authorized reseller program, it's really, a fairly small jump from that type of model into one of selective distribution in Europe. And so I think that they're more similar than they are different in that respect, an authorized reseller program against the selective distribution system.
Awesome. And really quick, a question comes in relation to the last question in regards to active and passive sales. How does taxation and import duties within the EU have an impact?
Not being a tax lawyer, I am not able to answer that question. The only thing I would say is, in 4 years of doing this, it's not something that has affected our approach or our analysis. So I think that ends up being a wholesale pricing issue, maybe. But we haven't thought about. We have not had to think about it for what we do at all.
Yeah, I think if you see if and again, we are not tax or customs import type people. We're distribution and online sales control people, helping brands to power Amazon strategies. But if you're in a situation where, if you look on Amazon UK and you see people offering your product that are based in France, Germany, Italy, Spain, wherever, you can bet that there is margin to be made, notwithstanding whatever tax or import duties there are from country to country. Okay, from the UK into the whole of Europe or whatever. The economics are such that there's still money to be made. And so that's, I think, the key point. If you're, to Sarah's point, your wholesale pricing, all of those sorts of things, net of any additional costs allow for profit to be made, somebody will be out there making it. If it's the opposite, then you'll likely have sort of more natural geographic silos of your product that they'll stay within a particular market just because the economic incentives aren't to move them around, supportive of moving them around.
Awesome. Love it. Just a reminder out there, if you have questions, drop into the chat, the Q&A, or you can keep emailing them to me, Aaron, AARON at bwgconnect.com. But awesome. Keep sending them in. Love it.
So, Sarah, one of the ways that we've heard US brands describing their US authorized seller program against their Europe selective distribution system is that in the United States, you're more so out, or you're in until you're out. So you distribute your policies down through your channels. And essentially, as long as the channel partners get your policies, continue buying your products, and you're not putting that seller on a do not sell list and circulating that through your two-step distribution channels, you've essentially framed out your authorized seller network in the US. So can you explain a little bit more about the you're out until you're in concept as it relates to selective distribution?
Yeah, I mean, I think also there are sort of different ways to do this, and much of it will depend on how much the brand wants to do. So there are lots of different options, I suppose. We've done selective distribution systems where the brand has wanted complete control. And that means that before anyone sells their product, they vet them, they look at their website, they interview them, they go and do a training session with them. Those sorts of things are perfectly fine if that is a brand is what you want to do. Alternatively, though, you can have a bit more of a hands-off approach, which is more realistic, I would say, for those brands who've got, say, a couple of distributors or maybe one distributor or wholesaler in a jurisdiction traditionally, and then lots and lots and lots of downstream retailers, and the brand sort of saying, whoa, well, do I have to add all of these to the selective distribution system? I mean, how does it work? I don't want contracts with like 40,000 shops across Europe. And the answer to that is that there are ways in which that can be done so that it's not so the brand doesn't need to do all the heavy lifting. Now, it's important to say that the selective distribution system will extend to all of those 40,000 retailers. So the point is they all need to be in it. But the ways in which you can ensure that they are in it are various. You can have a flow down where the wholesalers are required to only sell to distributors or retailers that meet criteria. You can have a sort of a sign-up function whereby any retailers that want to sell the product and have been approved tick a box to sort of say that they will continue to comply with criteria. So there are lots of different ways to do it. I mean, the important thing is that group remains sort of sacrosanct in the sense that once you're in, then you can't sell to anyone that is out. But the way in which the brands do it, you may have brands that have 4 or 5 resellers in Europe. You may have brands that have 40,000. And therefore, a lot of it comes down to commercially how the brand wants to manage it and how much they want to do.
And I just think, I mean, just real quick before you feel free to move on, Jess, I just want to sort of make the point to everybody just to sort of level set. All of the things we're talking about here, as we get through this, ladder up to how do you execute a particular online go-to-market strategy? How do you curate who's able to sell? In our experience, and just about every thought leader experience in the space, smaller number of sellers on marketplace, good. Big number, bad. And in Europe and the US, if you just leave things be, you have no basis to get to a protected, viable strategy. And so what we're talking about is how do we position our brands to be able to protect our 1P or our 3P strategy, leverage that for success and growth online, and then have everybody else in our ecosystem being happy to look at our situation on Amazon and not feel like they need to stop doing business with us or stop giving us shelf space because it's so out of whack on those channels.
Yeah, so actually that's a great segue, Daren. So why can't a brand in Europe, Sarah, just simply tell its downstream channel partners, you can't sell in online marketplaces, you can't sell on your own websites? Why can't they just exercise those types of online sales restrictions outright?
Well, so there's two sort of separate things. There is a mandate sort of from the European Commission. So there's a clear focus on online selling and the ability for brands, retailers, distributors to reach a European market. And if you think about it as part of the single market imperative, as it were, so you think of Europe as a single market. It is a combination of different countries, but there is a sense of it being a single market. And online sales are a fundamental part of that because they do allow, for example, a consumer in France to buy from a company based in Germany. And that is the way online sales ensure that there is this sort of single market. So just banning online sales is a big no-no. You cannot do it. But what you can do through a selective distribution system is ensure that you have quality control in place and a list of criteria that says you must sell our product in this particular way, and that can be tailored to how you want it to be sold in an online setting. And that can be as specific as, use these pictures, use this language. What you have to be careful about is that you're not using that as a kind of front to prevent online sales. But the reality is certainly with all the brands that we've spoken to and worked with, that they do want people selling their product online, of course, but they just want it done in the right way. And that's what selective distribution enables you to do, which is say, yes, of course, everyone should be selling online. That's great. But you just shouldn't be selling it like it's, pile it high and sell them cheap. We want it to be curated in a way that reflects the way it's, for example, sold in a brick and mortar store. And actually, that's a really important point to make, because, again, what we have seen in practice with a lot of brands is that they've spent years and years and years investing in the brick and mortar stores, investing in the type of sales training that goes with a particular product. They might invest in training, invest in various other things. And then when we kind of talk to them about their online sales, it's a total mess. And that's either because they haven't prioritized it, or sometimes because they've not understood and say, oh, well, we know we can't put any restrictions on online sales. So obviously we just allow them to do whatever we want to do because we know that that's what you need to do. Well, that's not right at all, because if you are allowed to put in place restrictions or some form of guidance and rules in a brick and mortar store, it's perfectly acceptable that a brand says, oh, and when you sell it online, we want your online sales channel to reflect the high quality service that you provide in a brick and mortar store, for example. And that sometimes can mean that, retailers need to get their act in order to make sure that they're selling in the right way.
So I think that leads in perfect. Just really quick, because we have a question that comes in. I see, it says, great presentation. Thank you. I see that for Europe, everything turns around selective distribution. Can you just spend a few words in regard to this exercise in the case of open distribution? Many thanks. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at a little bit, Sarah.
Yeah. And that's, what we, there are sort of three types of distribution that you would normally see across Europe. You have open distribution, which is just anyone selling to anybody. You've got exclusive distribution, which is where you would say have appointed exclusive distributors for certain territories. And then you've got the selective distribution. The problem with open distribution, which is something that we do see quite commonly, is that you're just not in any way, there's no way to control what is going on there. You've got people selling left, right, and centre, and you've not got the ability to say, those people can't sell my product because they're outside of the group. And the purpose of the selective distribution system, again, if we come back to the idea of a closed network, what that enables you to do is say anybody who is outside of the closed network cannot sell the product. If you have open distribution, you can't then say, right, well, you brand, you retailer over there, you can't sell my product because it's in free distribution in Europe. Yeah. So that's what you're trying to do.
And just to bring it forward, as it relates to e-commerce and marketplaces, you have no control over Amazon or other marketplaces. Assuming the product isn't counterfeit or there isn't an Amazon policy violation, which may happen in a small handful of scenarios, but you will have no mechanism or viable strategy to optimize your marketplace sales and profitability. And that's not a viable strategy for the vast majority of brands in any market in the world. It may be very good in brick and mortar, but you will underperform online.
Is another question that comes in, and it's something that I was thinking about on the back end. So in the US, right, we can take it and we can say, hey, now it's illegal for you to sell these. You don't line up with all these things that we're doing, and therefore it's now illegal. I can go in and I can remove you as an unauthorized reseller. You're off the platform. But it doesn't sound quite the same for the EU. And this question says, is there any possibility in Europe to stop unauthorized Amazon sellers?
The answer fundamentally is yes. And that's really why we're talking about everything that we're talking about. If you've heard us talk in the US, there are various things to do around your trademarks and material differences and those sorts of things. And we've written a lot about that. You can easily see that. I think the high level takeaway from that is you need a legal foundation to be able to remove those unauthorized sellers, because as it is in the US, it's the same in Europe. There's fundamentally nothing wrong with buying and reselling product. And so you need a legal foundation to be able to wade in and have any basis to stop that. In Europe, the selective distribution framework, the creation of this effective private members club, and all of the benefits that it entails gives you that foundation, such that when there is an unauthorized seller selling outside of your network in violation of your distribution setup, there are claims under various national laws that then become available to you, typically arising from some form of interference with your contractual setup. And that in Europe is the legal hook that will allow you to enforce against unauthorized sellers. So when you don't have this type of distribution set up, you have an exclusive model, or you have even worse yet, an open model. Not only can you not dictate what happens with downstream sales, so people buying through distributors, et cetera, you have no basis for enforcement against unauthorized online sellers, and you're stuck. There's nothing to do. When you have the right foundation in place, you can have appropriate levels of control over your authorized customers, vis-a-vis your policies that flow down through, and a basis to enforce against unauthorized. And that's just a very critical point in either market, that there is a way to do it, but it's very precise, and there's no box to check in brand registry or anything like that. You need the respective legal foundation to be able to do it.
Yeah, you can't just get the Market Track, Track Street, Price Spider, whatever it is, right? And just monitor, waiting for a lower sell, and then expect them to get removed. They don't have to leave.
Yeah, without commenting on any particular company, there's no monitoring technology that has anything to do with any of this. Okay, and yeah, you might try to scare somebody away or whatever, but fundamentally, you will not have control of your revenue if you can't stop unauthorized sellers with a legal basis. And the only way to have that legal basis in Europe is through a distribution setup like this. Just like in the US, it's through the legal foundation that we talk about all the time, and anybody can look up online.
Awesome. Love it.
So, Sarah, you kind of touched on this about how open distribution and exclusive distribution are really distribution models of the past, and how a selective distribution model is really not the future, but here and now. So can you just shed some insight on if you're seeing an uptick in brands transitioning over to selective distribution, some of the observations that you've had of those brands that have made that transition, and what their experience has been like living in the SDS model as opposed to that open or exclusive model?
So just a little bit of background, and without going through sort of ancient history of selective distribution, which no one will be interested in, but the high level point is that there was a sense for many years that selective distribution and having a curated members club of retailers was only something that was appropriate for certain types of luxury or high-end brands. So what we saw for decades in Europe was French perfume houses, luxury fashion houses, these sorts of things. They've had selective distribution in place since the 70s. This is not new. None of this is new for them. But what we see so much more now, and certainly in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, are brands who would not traditionally have thought themselves as wanting to do selective distribution because they erroneously thought it was only for brands of a certain type, for luxury brands, which is not the case. Very clearly, the Commission has said that's not the case. Realizing that actually this is something that's very attractive and it makes sense to move to, because ultimately, if they already have some, particularly I think, where you have sort of exclusive distribution models in place, they realize that actually it's not something that is too difficult to do. It just requires a change of mindset. And once companies have aligned to the fact that it is a switch over from what they have traditionally been doing, then the move over is and can be relatively straightforward. So we do see lots more brands who, and I suppose actually this is really as a result of Amazon, and I'm thinking, it's going to sound a bit silly, but brands that produce, we work with a lot of nutritional supplement brands, for example, the products are light. They can be posted all over Europe. When you've got a light product like that can be packaged up easily, but it's a high value product and it's a product that needs an element of guidance and how it needs to be sold, those are the sorts of things where suddenly you have brands coming to us and saying, oh, actually, well, we wouldn't have necessarily thought that nutritional supplements would want selective distribution, but we've realized that it's really important because people are selling our product in a way that is not at all how we want it to be sold. And because they are very easy to sell and very easy to ship, they can be quite expensive. It means that diverters and other resellers who don't want to make any investment in how the brand is presented on their Amazon page will just sell them all over the place. So that's why we see this real shift in the mentality of brands who 10 years ago wouldn't have considered selective distribution because it just wasn't relevant to their business. They just didn't think it was something they needed to do. Now sort of going, oh, right, yeah, this is something that we absolutely have to do because it is integral to the way we want to build our business going forward because we are focused on an online model. So I think, we definitely do see more brands that would not have traditionally thought about selective distribution deciding to go down that route because it gives them an element of control which they can't get from anywhere else.
There's a question, Aaron.
Yeah, it says, great one. It says, we already have an SDS in place. We already have SDS in place. We still have a problem with unauthorized sellers who join the listings created by us. Amazon does not require any verification of the authorization from the sellers. Is there any legal way to get Amazon to restrict access to the listings within SDS?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is generally no. In France is the only market in Europe where there is a box to check and brand registry that the seller is selling in contravention of your selective distribution system, and that can be effective. But in any other market in Europe, Amazon is not going to help you to enforce that. You're going to have to enforce that directly against the resellers themselves, and we run full enforcement programs in that respect. And that's really the short answer to the question and the direct answer to the question.
So there is a way to address it, but just not, Amazon's not going to get involved.
Yeah, no, there's no way to do it on Amazon other than in France.
I mean, brand registry in the US, click the box, doesn't mean nobody's going to sell it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no box to check for this issue in the US, just like there is in the whole of Europe, other than if you have selective distribution, you can do it in France. And then somebody asked what limitations and enforcement measures are associated with exclusive distribution in Europe. And the answer is there are no bases for online seller enforcement under a selective distribution model. I'm sorry, under an exclusive distribution model. Again, assuming that we're just talking about unauthorized, otherwise genuine product.
Awesome. I see we've got about 4 minutes left here.
So real quickly, just wanted to cover, Sarah, what you've observed about brands that have transitioned from exclusive or open over to selective. How do they tackle that? What do they need? What's general timing to make that change?
So, and this I think is, one of the key questions, and it sort of touches on the holistic solutions we were sort of talking about. So, we've had a variety of brands. Some come to us and they actually already have a selective distribution system in place, but it's just not fit for purpose and actually is what we would kind of call selective distribution light. So it doesn't really have the teeth that it needs. But then we have some who just haven't thought about this at all. And really, it doesn't matter what sort of state the brand is in when they come. What matters is that the right people within the company are invested and understand why this move needs to be made. That's the most important thing. So we can turn around the document. The documentation is relatively straightforward. I mean, not to suggest that I don't have incredibly difficult legal thinking to do about this, but actually we've done a lot of the legal thinking. And in terms of actually setting this in play, in train, there will be a process that needs to go through to understand how the distribution model works and how we want the brand to do things. But that is all just sort of process and documentation, which is what lawyers live for. So this is very, very straightforward. What is important is that before that happens, the right people within the company understand, so the right people being obviously the econ teams, but you also need any lawyers that you have. You need area sales managers from the key jurisdictions potentially. I mean, just to give an example, some of the things that stop things running smoothly is where you have a team who are pushing this forward, but they haven't actually got on board whoever it is in Germany. And then they get, they have a call and they say, we're moving to selective distribution. And then the kind of head to Germany says, well, no, there's absolutely no way we can do that because of this, that, and the other. And actually, it's about making sure that the right people who are responsible for the distribution across Europe know what's going on, understand why this is important, and that there is a clear shift from the senior leadership effectively to say this is important for the business and this needs to be done. For those brands who've come to us ready to go, I mean, the documentation can be done in a matter of weeks, frankly. So it really does depend a lot on the brands being in the right place. The other thing I would just mention, because it is relevant, is existing distribution contracts. So if you have a distribution contract in place that runs for a number of years, then that is what it is. That will be a contractual obligation. But at the same time, the other thing that we've seen in in markets where some of the retailers or distributors are quite keen themselves to move to selective distribution is that actually they may have an exclusive distribution contract that runs till 2025, but they're chomping at the bit to have a selective distribution system because that means that they can sell across the whole of Europe. So you can transition them out of their exclusive distribution contract to a selective distribution contract. That's a contractual issue, which then becomes a bit of an assessment of everyone being happy with that. But that can be done. It just, again, also there's a point about bringing along your distributors and retailers so that they understand the benefits of this as well.
Yeah, let me just add something real quick. And Aaron, I know you want to wrap up in a minute. I just want to say this, we've thrown a lot at you. And I think what's very important for any brand looking to, just even at a high level, how do I stop unauthorized sellers screwing me up in Europe? How do I protect my go-to-market in Europe or the States for that matter? You have to cut through all of this noise. Oh my gosh, these knee-jerk, really frankly, unsubstantiated reactions. This is too hard. This is too difficult. There's no way to do it. This is illegal. And just at least bring your teams forward to be educated. Like, for example, all of this in Europe is not about cutting off relationships with your good customers, about making things difficult, about any of that may be some knee-jerk reaction from somebody internally. It's about bringing your good customers in and keeping the bad people out. And fundamentally, you just need a structure in today's market to be able to do that. And what we've sort of laid out here are some of the parameters around that. So I would just encourage everybody just to force your teams to get educated about this and understand what is real and what isn't. And that will allow you then to make the strategic decision for your company relative to what your goals are in terms of, if you just want to flash up those KPIs real quick, Jess, your marketplace performance, as well as your brick and mortar performance and how your brick and mortar and core customers are reacting to the realities of the online channel. And so, and just leave, and the last thing I'll say, Aaron, if you go to the KPIs, Jess, in either market, whether we're talking about Europe or the States, if you do not have a program and a structure in place that allows you to measure and impact unauthorized seller revenue and enforcing that way down, and authorized seller revenue and pulling that way up, you are not doing anything commercially around your control strategy. You can send all the map violations you want in the US. You can try all the takedowns you want. You can high five that we did 1,000 takedowns last week. But unless you've moved those numbers, you haven't done anything to protect your strategy offline, and that will boomerang and bite you offline as well. So we'll let you hold your promise here, Aaron.
Well, awesome. Jessica, Daren, Sarah, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for everybody sending in the awesome questions. You want more information on this? They're the leaders in the space. They come recommended by more brands that we're talking to than anybody else out there. I really don't know anybody else that's doing it at the scale you are, at the quality you're doing it. So I'd say worth putting a follow-up time on the calendar with the team over at Vorys eControl, US and international. They're all around leaders. They've also been great friends, partners, supporters of the network. And so, thanks to you and your team, Daren. And I know we'll do a lot of in-person events this year with you guys as well. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. If you need any other advice, you ever want to chat, more than happy to connect with anybody on the line today. Again, we don't sell anything here at BWG Connect, but we do pick your brain to get the biggest topics and the things you're trying to tackle so we can get the most highly relevant educational sessions out there. Hope everybody has a fantastic Thursday, a great rest of the week. Everybody take care, stay safe. Look forward to having you at a future event. Thanks again, Daren.